I did help break up a human trafficking ring in Stockholm, working with the police. That was my first foray into compliance. At that point, this is live. We're talking cash in hand. The pressure really was on to get as many customers onboarded as possible. You don't know these people. You've never seen them. You've never spoken to them. The only thing that you can rely on is hoping that whatever data they've given to you is reasonably truth. As you get more and more senior, your neck is on the line and you are accountable to the FCA. The whole point of compliance is not to make life difficult for CEOs who've got fantastic ideas to disrupt financial services, but actually to protect the customers who are using those financial services.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Mergers podcast with me, your host, Rory Mason. With me, as ever, Ken Thomas.
How you doing?
How you doing, buddy? Been a while.
It's been a long quarter, been a long year.
Oh dear.
Today is March 3rd. It's already been long.
You were just saying that Back Future is going well?
Oh, it's going great. We got an intern.
Yeah.
Yeah,
from Syracuse.
Back from the home state of New York.
And the portfolio's flying?
Third of the portfolio's marking up, so we're good. We're happy.
I'm trying to do your marketing job for you because I don't know.
It's general solicitation. We have compliance episode today. I'm not trying to break any rules. You know?
That's a good point. Yeah. So with us today, we have Ambreen Khasru from Head of Compliance at eToro. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for inviting me.
No, it's our honor. Thank you. So a bit of background for those that don't know, and then I'll sort of let you explain your story. But your CV is pretty interesting. You've been at just a host of the major unicorns and then sort of the $500-600 billion companies. I've got Zilch, Juni, Monese, and now Head of Compliance at eToro, which I'm particularly excited to get into given my background in finance. But it didn't start there. It started in music and sales and a long way away in sort of Paris and Sydney. So look, I mean, it's your story to tell, but I'd love to know how you sort of zigzagged your way across the world and across industries.
Sure. So I grew up here, and my first job actually was getting paid to travel. So actually, that's not in my CV, but I worked in the hotel industry on the sidelines, not actually in the hotels themselves.
Sorry, so you started getting paid to travel?
Yeah.
And then sort of all downhill from there.
I'm still getting paid to travel, but in a very, very vastly different way. But yeah, so essentially I worked for hotel chains in the regional sales office, negotiating room nights for tour operators, which is probably way before your time. And I traveled all over the world and got a huge taste for that, as you can imagine. And then over the years, I fell in love with an Australian, decided to go to Australia, and from there it went all downhill, yeah. For sure. So essentially there is method to my madness and my career, but it's basically all to do with data. Data specifically before any of these sort of AI things existed in the ways that they do today. So when I was in Australia, I worked for privatizing a government agency. And then I worked for Factiva, and Factiva at the time was a subsidiary of Dow Jones and Reuters. So the news to you and the financial people as well, if you think about it, because Reuters and Dow Jones were very heavily like the Bloombergs of this world. So my job at that point was to negotiate intellectual property rights of all the newspapers and magazines and get those onto their database before newspapers were online. And I did that for a number of years. And then after I fell out of love, I did a master's in business and technology, always had been interested in technology. And then instead of coming back to the UK, as I'm half French, I decided to go to Paris. And that is where we join up to what you've been looking at on my CV.
Yeah.
I did a few years of what we would call value-added services to the mobile phone industry, all to do with music. So ringtones, monophonic and polyphonic ringtones before Apple and Spotify existed.
Was that back in the Sony Ericsson days?
Yeah, exactly.
I remember those. You used to sort of like Bluetooth Crazy Frog to your friend and you'd be like the cool kid in school.
Yeah, exactly. So my job was more on the product side. I was the in between the music labels and the mobile phone companies. And I don't know if you remember, you'd have to pay a lot of money to actually have a ringtone put onto your phone in those
like
days.
$2-3.
Yeah,
each,
it was.
Yeah.
And for me, it just seemed pretty futile. What I loved the most was that I got invited to every single concert and, all over the place. And that was fabulous. But one of my craziest moments in that industry was to try and get a Madonna single uploaded onto all the phones at the same time all around the world. So we're talking Australia, Europe, England, everywhere.
So it's before you two had that one song that was on every single device.
Yeah, exactly. It was a similar. So it was really, that at that moment, I thought, what am I doing? I need to get out of this industry.
So that's okay. Sorry, just because I thought my mind went to. It's so weird. We went to the same place. That like involuntary download period.
I don't think you could delete that song either. It just was always there.
Hardwired. Was that like then an idea at the time that would almost be, because now obviously we choose what goes on our phone, and then people steal our data. But it's like, was the idea that firms would sort of direct what would be and wouldn't be on phones?
Precisely. There was Napster. Did you hear? Have you heard of Napster?
Yeah.
So Napster was the only sort of illegal. Please forgive me, Napster, whoever worked for them.
Napster gods.
Yeah. That was the only sort of free downloads, let's put it that way, that existed, whether legally or illegally. Let's not go into that. But essentially, that would be the only way that you could download music onto any device. And as we all know, there were multitudes of devices, multitudes of sound formats, multitudes of everything that doesn't exist today. I did, for a very small time, work for a guy who tried to save the CD by putting a software onto CDs and allowing people to have exclusive content to that artist that the CD that they purchased. And that was fun too. But then I just did 3 or 4 years of that and came out of it totally. And I know this is going to sound really weird, but my passion is food, and I wanted to open my own restaurants. My parents had few restaurants here in London, so I did a bit of dabbling in that. And from there, I know this sounds completely wild, I fell into financial services. So I was in Paris. I'm half French. A friend of mine who had worked in the restaurant industry with me said to me, "Come to MoneyGram." That was the first company that I was presented to the financial services industry in remittances. Come to MoneyGram. In Paris they had, or in France they had, what they called their own stores. So basically they're like mini bank branches. So I had a team of about 30 people. I had to run it as if it was my own business.
When was this roughly?
Oh gosh, 2011, 2000, around that time, yeah.
That's when cross-border payments had like a real stranglehold.
Precisely.
Like a really good business. I think now they're a little more challenged, but back then they were. I remember dating a Canadian girl who basically was like, her parents would wire her $20 and pay like $40 in fees.
Yeah.
It's
exactly right. It was a bit like that. I mean, the monopoly was Western Union, MoneyGram, Ria. We've all heard of those names before. So essentially, yes, as you can imagine, a lot of people sent a lot of money back home because that was the sort of given that if you moved away from your family, one of the criteria was to send whatever you earn in Europe or Utopia, as they thought it would be, back home. So yes, to your point, fees were very high. But it helped me to see this sounds absolutely awful what I'm going to say, but at the same time fascinating, because I'm really fascinated by people and their cultures, is to see how people did actually live and how that impacted them. So you can imagine that was my first foray into compliance, because at that point, this is live. We're talking cash in hand, cash to cash. We're not talking about any digital world here. Of course, in the background everything's digital, but actually you're coming in with your hard-earned cash, giving it over to us, and then we do the rest and send it to whichever mum and pup store in whichever country in the world, whatever the diaspora was. So as I said, I saw, it was the first time that I really saw things that you traditionally wouldn't see, such as romance scams,
the pig butchering,
exactly,
thing,
all sorts of things. And I
What? Sorry?
Pig butchering is this like the romance scams. I think that's kind of what it is. They'll do this whole thing where like they make you fall in love, then they start asking you for stuff, and then they start making threats, blackmail, that whole thing.
Did you ever get an email when you were younger from somebody from somebody
Still replying.
Well, someone in Nigeria, hello, I need some money because my whoever relation or relative is stuck, and can you help me? Those were the sorts of things that I was seeing live, and obviously when you're working in a branch with people, you can't actually say to that person anything other than if I had had a small room where I could have spoken in an interview style. But actually, the only question that we could ask the customers was, do you actually know the recipient?
That's
and
legally.
And that was legally the only thing that you could ask. And you couldn't ask much more than that. And so therefore, from Paris, I helped build MoneyGram in the Nordics, and the Nordics was even worse than Paris and France, because here you had these quite fairly naive customers who were sending money to Angelina Jolie and Paris Hilton, and you would say to them, "Do you know Angelina Jolie?" "Oh yes, I know her. She's coming. I'm sending her money to buy a ticket. She's coming over," and those were the sorts of things that I used to see. So I'm a human being. I'm looking at these other human beings saying, you can't say anything. So the frustration was there. And at the same time, I don't want to go into too much detail, but I did help break up a human trafficking ring in Stockholm, working with the police. So all of these things started really piquing my curiosity, just from the purposes of being a human being and seeing these people who were giving their hard-earned cash to obviously fraudsters.
Did that, without prying,
did that
question. Come from, as in you saw the money flows at the business and you were like, actually, there's a lot more going on here?
Precisely.
And, you say you don't want to get too much into the case, but I guess, in terms of like serious crimes like that, fraud is one thing, but like human lives are another. How do you find yourself working with, I guess, authorities in that sense to kind of save humans and protect them?
Well, this is the thing. Everything, regardless of what we can imagine, it was very anonymous. And I really can't go into too much detail because obviously the case of the human trafficking was to do with human trafficking of ladies, sort of Epstein style.
Operation Epstein Fury.
But it's true. Just to give you a little bit of detail, if you're really that curious, we would probably get a list of potential customers from the police, and then we would just monitor who was coming in, where would they send the money, and that's how we helped them develop where were the sort of areas of where the business was actually managed from.
They're mapping out the network. Yeah,
precisely, because it's extremely organized, and that's how we helped. And as you can imagine, the authorities were very, very grateful because those kind of breakdown of organized criminal activities is where you want to get to be able to protect customers, because the whole point of compliance is not to make life difficult for CEOs who've got fantastic ideas to disrupt financial services, but actually to protect the customers who are using those financial services from the people that innocently or very, happily want to take all your money away from you.
Yeah. Can I just ask then, because my background was I was in research and moved to investor relations, kind of like a client-facing role.
Yeah.
And there is like always a sort of joke that, that compliance get a fail bonus. So, they get paid by the amount of no's they give you. How do you balance that attitude of or how do you show people that you're working together towards a common goal? And it's not like you guys are the guards and we're from your perspective, maybe the cowboys who overpromise and tie the business in knots.
So put it this way, I think the perception of compliance, people perceive us as being the Darth Vader living in a dark room looking at all these types of, links, organized crime. But actually, in my case, I would probably say that I'm lucky to have seen the business development side of the world. So if I do the combination of looking at regulations, legislation, customer protection, as I mentioned earlier, and we can go into that in more detail, and common sense business growth, because at the end of the day, we are the know people, but actually try and find solutions based on how you interpret regulation, how you interpret legislation gets you a lot further. Because as you can imagine, to your point, compliance has the reputation of being the friction in the company, friction in company growth, and we're not. We're quite innovative, actually, and there's so many innovative solutions out there in order to combat, money laundering, terrorist financing, God forbid, and all sorts of other fun things that we look at on a daily basis. So I would suggest that when I first started, it was pretty much the Darth Vader type approach. And today it's much more, you need to be advisory, you need to be like a business partner, protecting the firm, protecting customers, and ensuring that business still continues to grow irrespective of what's going on in the regulatory world and the landscape out there.
Obviously, MoneyGram was like classic institutional. You and I met, we were working at Juni, having worked back in the States at HSBC and M&T Bank, we kind of had the BD side and, having worked with compliance. But then when I started working with Juni, I had that understanding what the BD side was, but also knew what real like hard compliance looked like. So I was able to work with FinCrime a bit more on those teams. But, moving from an institutional standpoint to a fintech standpoint, one, how is that shift? How did it happen? And, how do you have you seen those connections between commercial and compliance teams come together?
The beauty and the ugliness of a fintech is its agility, and then you've got the prudential side. So you're balancing the two, because obviously, talking about eToro, we'll talk later because you have that prudential side. I would say that throughout my career, I've worked in different areas of payments and, buy now, pay later. So regulation is different depending on what your offering and your product offering is. I've also worked in banking as a service where you're only doing B2B and not doing B2C. So that's another model in itself as well. So let's take the banking as a service model. The whole purpose of a banking as a service model is, number one, technology. It's not about finance. It's about all of these fintechs actually underlying pin is technology. And the financial layer just sits on top, really, if you think about it, because they're trying to provide ways of onboarding more quickly, noticing unusual patterns more quickly, getting solutions and answers more quickly. Everything is about being fast. Especially when I started. Monese was, oh my gosh, the first thing that we ever thought was a miracle was being able to onboard somebody in 3 minutes, which a bank could never do, obviously.
They still can, I don't think.
Yeah, exactly. And that was revolutionary at the time.
Still got clients from Barclays still onboarding.
And that was the revolutionary thing. It was like, wow, we can onboard a customer in 3 minutes. And that was the sort of tagline that all of those, whether you talk about Revolut or Monese, Monzo, Starling, they all started around about the same time in 2015-ish. And that was the tagline. Let's onboard you really quickly. And then the next tagline was, okay, let's offer you lots of different currencies, multi-currency accounts, etc. So obviously, from a compliance perspective, you have to get behind that. And the only way you can get behind that is not causing the friction that you wouldn't ordinarily cause if you went through a very traditional funnel of onboarding. So KYC, know your customer. As we know, when you go into a bank, you are physically sitting in front of somebody, you get to know that person. You were saying earlier on, your girlfriend was sending money home. Those are the sorts of questions a bank would ordinarily ask you when you're opening an account. Who are you? Where do you live? The usual, how many kids do you have? Oh, my kid's studying in this country, so it means that you're probably going to be sending money over to that country. So you've already got a bit of a profile happening in your mind, and in the bank's mind. Online, all of that goes away. And obviously, you need to, at the time when we were onboarding people in 3 minutes, customers didn't trust us, because that is completely different to the norm of what people were used to, which is the scenario I just described, to suddenly, we're going to ask your name, your date of birth, your address, your email, and you have no idea what's going on in the background with regards to checks and balances. And that potentially made some people very, very curious and some people very nervous, because, as I said, we're disrupting that whole onboarding. So when it came to compliance, and that you're sitting there and you have no idea about this customer, you have very little to go on in terms of data, it makes it all the more difficult for compliance and financial crime. At that point in time, I'm not talking about now, we'll talk about now in a minute, but at that point in time, we didn't have all the technology that we have today. We didn't get to know all the patterns of behavior that we have today. I mean, now you can look at an IP, you can look at a device, you can look at everything, obviously with AI, with deep fakes and everything else, you can start understanding that there's technology that can actually, an AI can actually see something that's created by AI, which is fascinating as well. But anyway, as such, my whole job, again, was to make sure that we didn't create friction and that we could onboard as many customers as possible, because, as you know, at that time, everything was very VC-backed and it was all about how many customers can you onboard and when am I going to get a return on my investment. So it was all about, and you probably saw that in the news, any of the bigger fintechs were saying, oh, I've got 10 million customers, 5 million customers, 3 million customers, I've hit 1 million customers, look at us, we're brilliant. But in actual fact, it was all thanks to this sort of evolving technology at the time.
Have you noticed a difference, going back to this theme of compliance working with people, not against people? Have you noticed a difference in that growth at all costs era to now, in terms of, was there more pressure on you back then to sort of enable that growth? Or
yeah, yeah, those are the days.
Yeah.
There's clearly some stories.
Yeah. Well, yes, because as we mentioned before, there was VC money was so free at that time. Today, it's very tied up. There's no VC money. It's pretty much dried up in terms of fintech, and there's not much more that you can potentially create in the fintech world. I mean, at the end of the day, you need an account, you need to be able to pay, and that's it. I mean, that sounds very basic, but yeah, at that time, the pressure really was on to get as many customers onboarded as possible. So you can imagine, as I mentioned before, you don't know these people. You've never seen them. You've never spoken to them. The only thing that you can rely on is hoping that whatever data they've given to you is reasonably truthful. And then from there, you've just got to look at their behaviors. And actually, it makes the customer journey very, very different to when you go to a bank. They've seen you. They've kind of got a bit of a picture of you and an image of you and how you're going to spend your money, and whereas we're going on a reactive path all the time. So not only are you trying to onboard and get that pressure of onboarding as many customers as possible, but you also have that pressure during COVID, and I can talk about COVID, which was absolutely horrendous when it came to scams. I had to offboard so many customers because there was so much organized crime going. So whilst you're onboarding on one side, you're offboarding on the other side. That was also a crazy period as well.
Yeah, and I guess also there's the education point of having commercial teams being the first line of defense as well before it even hits compliance. I remember we were working at Juni, there's a lot of accounts coming from Morocco and other places, and you kind of know it's a bit dodgy. But I think
Morocco's not a famous gold mine for legitimate clients.
There were a few that came through that were good. I think, I don't know, what wasn't on my pipeline, but someone's. But I guess just on that note, right? Obviously you've worked at a few of these places, but then specifically with our time at Juni, obviously there's very rapid and large rounds that were done. And I think we get to understand if there's a cheat sheet or quick tips that any company or startup specifically in a regulated space need to understand about compliance if they're looking to take on cash, right? And especially at a rapid pace, because things change quickly. If you try to get a lot of customers in, how are you managing that well? Because our VC is really looking at quality and safety of customer base as well.
Yeah, they are. I mean, it is a really difficult thing to juggle, especially during those times where, as I said before, VC money was very easy to get hold of. And a lot of these VCs were pumping millions and millions into some of the companies that are extremely successful today, thankfully, and some that have completely disappeared off the face of this earth. We will not name any, or are practically on their way out.
Let's play a round of throw them under the bus.
No. Never do that. The world's too small. But essentially, yeah, I mean, I don't even know how to answer that question, because on the one hand, VCs are they're an interesting animal in themselves. I'm talking about the big ones, because obviously they want to see a return on their investment. Safety, yes, absolutely. But at what price? Because obviously what's lovely about the electronic money institution license, and please forgive me, any regulator that's looking at me right now,
Actually, if you could just explain what the EMI is
okay.
for the acronym is myself. So
yeah. So just really 2-second history. Up until 2000, the only institutions that could take deposits, and I can't really say that an e-money is in a deposit, were banks. And then the electronic money institution was developed, which basically is taking your fiat money and you convert it into electronic money. And all of these fintechs that I've worked for, and the ones that we all know of, basically segregate your funds into a safeguarding account, which is how they protect your money. Whereas the banks take your deposits, do whatever they want with it, and then say that under the FSCS, that they'll protect up to £120,000 irrespective of how much money you've got in your bank, way above that. That's guaranteed. So in a way, strangely, an EMI is slightly safer than a bank, ironically, for as long as it's not defrauded by lots of fraudsters. But yeah, it is.
That's quite interesting. I never knew that.
Yeah.
We our loophole at Barclays Private Bank for people with huge deposits, it got jittery because obviously you didn't want them to leave the bank.
Yeah.
Was we used to put them in just in money markets.
Yeah, sure.
Or just short-term gilts.
Sure.
And then it's a custodied asset, so it's not non-secured.
Yeah, it doesn't belong to you.
Credit to the bank, where you're at the bottom of the payout, you're kept in a little separate custodied container. Downside is, I suppose, if things went really wrong, it'd take you quite a long time to get your money out, but it would, in theory, be there.
I mean, the FCA being probably one of the most innovative regulators on this planet, I would say.
Is that just because we're in the UK, or?
Huh?
Is that just because we're in the UK?
No. I really.
So
I truly
Ambreen's
believe
clearly
it.
she's got a request for it at the moment. She's like,
No, I've worked with loads of different regulators. Believe me, I think it's probably one of the most innovative. They have a carve out for that as well. I mean, whilst I'm saying that all your money is safeguarded in a tier 1 bank, you can also put them into MMFs or QMMFs, but ones that have got.
What are those? Because we.
Money market funds, which is what Rory was saying earlier. You can actually carve out and put some money into MMFs as well. Money market funds, I apologize. But they have to be like the lowest risk possibly known to mankind. So government bonds, country bonds, things like that.
3 days to maturity.
Precisely. So... But that's another conversation. It's got nothing to do with compliance. But essentially, yeah, there is that possibility as well.
Yes, I was going to say, obviously, you touched on COVID and obviously everything that happened there. But one thing I've noted was in that period, you've moved around to quite a few different firms. And I wondered if that was by design or just because of the environment you were in. And then maybe, depending on the answer, I guess, but some advice to people listening, because it feels like the era of the 30-year career man and career woman has kind of changed and you're encouraged to move around a bit more.
So it's a combination of various things. So one would be product. I'm very into product. So what are we offering? What are we selling? And then people. So one of the most important factors for me is, as I have been in some pretty leading compliance roles, how much are we investing in compliance? That is a really important question for anyone who wants to work in compliance. If no one's going to invest in compliance, and we do see some roles on LinkedIn where startups are saying, okay, come and be whatever role, and we're going to pay you 60, 70 grand, and that looks quite appealing, but actually it probably means that they've not got much in terms of investment on the compliance side. And I can tell you, and I don't work for the FCA, but having engaged with them on quite a few levels, from licensing to obviously answering questions that they have throughout my career, depending on which company I'm in. One thing that the FCA is now looking at is exactly that. How much is a company ready to invest in compliance? And if they're not, they will actually ask the company to revoke their license. Yeah, because they're, as I said earlier, they were the most innovative, and probably still are, regulator, and attracted an enormous amount of companies before Brexit happened. So the reason why potentially I moved around a little bit was partly to do with what I'm talking about, and I'm not going to name names because that's not fair, but also, as I mentioned earlier on, compliance can be very innovative. It's not a blocker or a stopper the way people perceive compliance to be today, because the technology to help compliance and help detect things is so much more sophisticated than when I first started in 2011, that it's really hard to block business unless there's something really radical that comes out in legislation or regulation, which the nice part of being an electronic money institution and a fintech is that you go about things in a risk-based approach way. What does that mean? You have a business, you have a certain number of customers, you know who your target market is normally, and from there you sort of work out what your risks are, and from those risks you then interpret regulatory handbooks or whatever, source books, and look at what is proportionate to my business, rather than saying, okay, it's black and white and there's nothing else. There you really do look at this risk-based approach. So some companies take that to another level and some don't. And some and they take a little bit too much of an ease on that risk-based approach. And being
is that, out of interest, is that culture, is that set by the C-suite?
Yeah.
It
is totally set by the C-suite. A lot of the time, the CEOs that potentially set up fintechs are not usually from a financial background. They may be from some other background, have seen that they want to disrupt financial services for whatever reasons. One of the stories or the sub-stories of the early, 2015 bunch of companies was always about, I came to London, couldn't open a bank account, so I decided to create a fintech. That was also another tech.
That's a problem I faced coming here as well in 2023. Like, still couldn't open a bank account.
Really? 2023?
Yeah, it took me a very long time. It was still a massive issue.
Wow, okay. So a lot of these CEOs were, out of frustration, created their own fintechs, and as I said, some are hugely successful, some not so much. But getting back to this risk-based approach, and the reason why I moved around is that when you get more and more senior in a company, especially in compliance, a lot of liability and accountability sits on you, because the FCA expects you to be an approved person. That means that you're target to them, and you take that compliance responsibility. So if you're not doing your job very well, the FCA will come to you. Obviously, it will go to the board as well. The board has a lot of accountability. Don't think it's just you as an individual and that you're all out there on your own in your little boat rowing on your own. It's just as, fintechs have a responsibility. They're dealing with people's money, so therefore they need to have accountability and be accountable for risks that they're taking that are beyond reasonable. Let's put it that way. So therefore, when you are in a role and you're taking some risk on behalf of the company, and that the company is not there to support you, there's a time and a moment where you just go, okay, how much is this risk to me personally? A lot. I'm going to go and thank you very much.
Because your neck is on the line, isn't it?
Precisely.
Yeah.
It is. As I said, as you get more and more senior, your neck is on the line, and you are accountable to the FCA.
And just to kind of expand on that, because I've seen some of this processes, like you say an approved person, but that's actually a very formal process. You have to go to the office, interview, like on the documentation on like company's house, you're listed there. So what does that kind of look like there?
Well, you're actually listed depending on what your role is, but approved person is basically, so there are several roles that the FCA are very interested in: the CEO, the board, the CFO, the IT guys, because of cybersecurity and all sorts of things like that. Then the money laundering reporting officer, the MLRO, the compliance officer. All of those are what they call accountable people. At the end of the day, everyone in a fintech is responsible and accountable for any decisions that they make, and anything that they see as suspicious. However, you can't make the entire company accountable, so you make certain individuals that are so you go through a process where you fill out a form, you tell a lot of what your life is to the FCA. You've got to make sure you have no CCJs, that you've never been bankrupt, that you know, it's quite tough. And your CV, your background, why can you do the job? How can you do the job? And basically, as I mentioned before, if the FCA wants to scrutinize you for X or Y reason, they will come and knock on your door.
I'm assuming this is like a more enhanced version of what I would have done as a financial advisor, effectively.
Yeah. Financial advisor is on another level. You've got other responsibilities. An MLRO is obviously, it's something that was invented by the regulators. They're actually almost like an employee of the regulator, because they're there to make sure that you identify all money laundering, counter-terrorist financing, all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
As quickly as possible, and remediate as quickly as possible, and report it to the local, like national crime agencies in the UK, the NCA, and then reporting to the FCA itself. So yeah.
I want to drill down on like eToro, where you are now, and I'll give some background as I think of eToro, and tell me if I go wrong. But huge firm, like $5, $6, $7 billion or something like that. Amazing. So it's anyone that doesn't know, a trading platform kind of with like an integrated social media element. So it's kind of like Twitter plus trading. And obviously that means, you know, you can follow traders, you can better access to information, trade ideas, really engaging. I think it's like an awesome, really cool product. What I would, and where I want to push a little bit, is how you manage the compliance side. Because it's a really sort of like out there product. It's one of the few that's introduced, like say this, or the only one I think that's introduced is copy trading. Yeah. And I suppose there will be some argument about where the line is between financial advice or, you know, sort of, let's say you're launching a hedge fund. In a weird way, you could launch a mini one on eToro by getting a few LPs and saying, I'll place a trade, you copy me. So how have you managed that balance between building an unbelievable giant of a business, but in a really like edge of the sort of, you know, it's not just an IG or a
sure. I mean, we still go down the very traditional route. So regardless of whether you're what we call a professional investor, those are the people that customers can copy. We still go through a very traditional onboarding, old school, old-fashioned way of allowing people to trade on eToro. So irrespective of whether you're one of those cutting-edge investors that people are copying, if you, for example, come across eToro and go, oh yeah, I want to be able to trade quickly, I'm going to copy somebody, we still make you go through quite a laborious appropriateness test to be able to onboard and to understand whether you are able to invest responsibly. So irrespective of that, we still go through the traditional route of assessing people's possibility to trade or not.
Responsible copying. Responsible copying.
Yeah. So we can't get around that. And why should we? We shouldn't have to, or should.
So you're protecting the copiers from, you're saying like, even though you're just copying someone, you need to understand
the
their
basic
strategy
principles.
kind of, or the
Well,
basic.
they're just the basic principles of investing and trading, let alone copying. Let's just face it. I mean, if we all sat here and looked at the last things Warren Buffett did before he retired, as he's probably retired now because he's just too old, you saw what he sold off, you saw what he bought. Really, it's up to you whether you want to copy what he's doing as well. We can't hold those people responsible nor liable for any losses, and that's very clear. In terms of, in fact, as I said to you, the mindset is slightly different. We put the onus on you as an individual. Whatever you do on our platform, it's really up to you, and you're responsible for whatever it is that you decide to do. And you have to do it in a way that we suggest from the appropriateness test that allows you to invest or not in different ways, add limits. The wonderful thing about eToro, and I'm not doing any marketing here because I don't really like doing that on any of the companies that I work for, but you have different levels of trading as well. So you belong to a different club tier. Okay. So you start off on the lower level, and the more you invest and the more you go to higher levels, and that is where you'll get better exposure to the copy traders that we're talking about. Because unless you prove to us that you can invest responsibly, you're not going to be thrown in the deep end and go, okay, right, I'm going to copy the guy who's got the best trades on the platform. You've got to learn as well along the way.
I guess just as a quick aside, because one of the eToro things, I guess you can just copy anyone, right? There's also this rise of, like, in the US, we have something called autopilot, where you can just copy trade the trades of, elected officials. I guess, and this might not be a compliance thing, but what are your thoughts on this new rise of copy trading? Yeah.
So, if we look at AI, and one of the fascinating pieces of technology that we're all talking about is Claw.
Open Claw.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of fascination around Claw. As scary as it is, it's absolutely fascinating, because I'm taking into account that, as you said, you can copy anybody at the end of the day, and AI is going to take you that way anyway, regardless. Forget the eToros of this world. Obviously, eToro will embrace that type of technology. We have an AI capability called eToro, I can't remember what it's called, but anyway, we have that capability already within the platform. So I think you have to go with whatever's coming technology-wise, because if you don't, you're going to sit behind the curve and not ride the wave, so to speak, and do this responsibly. That's my compliance hat. But everything that eToro does, obviously, whenever we have some innovative product launches coming up, we look at it, we study it, we really, really dive into it to make sure that it is compliant, and also that it sits within our customer profile, and that we're still protecting them. But yeah, Claw is going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, they're hosting a pretty big event this Saturday with Sequoia, so they've been making the rounds. The Claw team. Well,
I bet they have. I bet they have. I mean, as I said to you, it's really frightening and fascinating at the same time.
I was just in Cape Town for a few weeks. We talked about off camera.
Yeah,
and I stayed with Opus. Shout out Opus.
Shout out to Ken.
Yeah, friend of the pod.
Friend of the pod.
The only one we have.
But AI is, I mean, it's fascinating what you can do now. It's like you can literally say to AI, from what I understand, speaking to some people that I speak to, you can say to AI, I want this, and go out and have a drink for 4 hours, and it will have created your entire app.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, which way you want it to exist and be.
One of the girls was showing me her agents. I was like, yeah, just fix this bug, and it's just done this. And I was like, oh my God. I feel so old already. Do you embrace it in your, because you're investing in these kind of things?
Yeah. Funny enough, we did invest in a company that's using AI to machine learning to protect from cyber fraud for banks. So yeah, I mean, from an agentic standpoint, I mean, generally, I do kind of ask, like, the joke is like, oh, you use OpenClaw to do all these things, like, cool, but what are you doing with it? And it's like, cool, it does a lot of things, but it's still kind of waiting on the outcome. There's a lot of interesting use cases I see, like, but personally, just to get to personal usage, yeah, I mean, I try to keep things a little artisanal, but the workflows and stuff, I've been kind of changing that for automation and stuff. One of our companies, they kind of really they're not so much generating stuff, but they're just automating workflows that could then, those tighter points of automation on each part of the workflow make for a better outcome versus just saying an end-to-end prompt to just do something, So like, yeah, I mean, my short answer, yes, a little bit. And then, but understanding what the best ways for these things to be sold for as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what saved me during COVID. The level of sophistication that AI has today certainly wasn't what I was playing with during COVID, but those models saved me because obviously you see repetitive behavior, you can identify it a lot more quickly. I had data scientists working left and right on both desks beside me, and with those large language models and whatever models, we were able to detect things that you would never have been able to detect so quickly. It would have taken a human being much longer than where we are today, that's for sure.
I think this is just like a personal theory, but what I've been like looking into quite a lot is a company called Warby Parker, who do the partnerships, I think, with Meta for their AI glasses. Yeah. And then you got Silo Luxottica, I can never say the name. Luxottica. That's been like a classic stock that people have owned for years, just like monopoly on the sunglass market. They've got Oakley to everyone else.
Yeah.
But then Warby Parker's quite interesting because it's got this sort of AI theme. But potentially if that becomes the next computing platform, just imagine how like weird and different pitch meetings and boardroom meetings would be if everyone's got an LLM hearing the conversation and like, just a little feed like your boss currently hates you or whatever. To pitch harder, you're losing it here. I don't know. It's kind of scary.
It's funny you say that because I literally saw an article today that said, so I think it was this whole thing that the moderators for like Meta and all these folks, that was a big thing when like they were talking about like child and, there's like violent like stuff as well. Someone has to look at that and say, okay, like this has been reported, is this like kind of whatever? And there's like now with the glasses, that also goes to people, and they're saying like they're seeing people like using it nude or whatever it might be. And it's like, I think sometimes we forget, even though there's AI involved in certain things, it still goes to someone, especially if it's like Meta.
Oh, the data they're gonna get is
and that's the thing too. So like that's actually a compliance issue. So if you're using this in a boardroom or a meeting like that, and like, okay, well, you can't come in here with these glasses because we don't know where this data is going to go.
Yeah, that's another side of the coin.
Yeah.
Thankfully, in Europe and the UK, you have GDPR. So, not like in the States. Well, you have a little bit of it, but not so much of it.
Data is our second greatest resource in America, right after freedom.
Yeah, you do whatever you want.
Oh, God. It's so... I sort of have two opposing views. Number one, I think this like AI bubble, half of me is like it's beginning to show quite a lot of signs of stress. It wouldn't surprise me if there was a sort of deleveraging event soon. But then the other half of me is like I can literally see how it's now becoming so heavily ingrained in day-to-day lives. I don't know if you guys would have any views on that. It's a bit of a change of topic, but
I think more the latter than the former. I mean, I think from the perspective of heavily investing into AI is probably going to it is slowing down already, right? But in terms of, I mean, even the people that have created some of the biggest AI companies on this planet want it to slow down. So, even if they are very excited about where it can go and whatnot, I don't think we're going to get away from it. I think it's going to be here forever. But it just needs to be, I mean, this is me being compliance. It needs to be a little bit more regulated than it currently is. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's funny you said there's a company I was seeing. So obviously, core systems in the bank, COBOL based, not many COBOL writers. And they're like, and it's not just one, I've seen a few, but they're like, we are able to fix your entire core system with AI and modernize it. And like, so it's like, so you think, and I'm like, and it's like, how long it's like, oh, we can do it in a few days. And so you think a bank on legacy systems is going to let you go in there with some AI, just fix their core systems?
Well, that's what data privacy is about, isn't it? It's like you can't, there's only, well, getting back to Meta and other companies, I can't speak for them, but it's a very different model to a banking model. So they look at data very, very differently, even having to the point where personal information on a customer a PAN number. So the PAN number is the 16-digit number of your credit card or your debit card. Even that has to be, anonymized. Everything has to be anonymized. So
I think before we get too nihilistic about the end of the world, especially because I've just got off a long flight, so I'm probably prone to just slumping at this point, I'd like to do some sort of like quick fire questions, just to get your take on the industry, where we're going, and then obviously we'll wrap it up because I know you've got somewhere to be. But one question I would say is, and I think you've done this really well, you've like humanized compliance and made it seem much more than what I perhaps thought it was at the start of this. But what would you say to people? Like, would you advocate for people going into compliance, or would you say see other parts of the business, get that experience, and then move in?
Wow, that's a really interesting question, because I was fortunate enough to see all parts of the business when I was at MoneyGram specifically, because obviously, as I mentioned earlier, I saw people coming in with their hard-earned cash and sending it over, who are they sending it to, etc. And then people who worked for me and my team and the temptations of stealing that cash. So, I've seen two sides. So in that sense, I'm very grateful for having had that exposure. However, if I had to start again, and I think that would be a great place to start, I would go into compliance. It's fascinating. I think when you as a person have a bank account, and I say this to everybody when I start training them, you have a bank account. You want your money to be safe, right? Yes. You're really happy when you receive those little texts that say, oh, this amount of money is coming into your account, this amount of money is going out of your account, it's going to whichever recipient, whichever beneficiary. That is what compliance is about. It's not just about, identifying organized crime. It's also, as I mentioned earlier, protecting customers, keeping their money safe at the most basic level. Because that's really important to many, many people, and probably everyone. So from that perspective, I would say start in financial crime. Don't start in compliance. Compliance is a very large word. So underneath compliance, you have, financial crime, you have consumer duty, which I'm not going to go into, but basically that's the layer that sits above everything, making sure that there are positive outcomes for customers, which is essentially what I'm talking about, that they understand the financial product that they're getting into and everything else. But yeah, I would start in financial crime, because that's where you see things that you would probably never imagine in your mind people can do. The ways fraudsters work, the way people launder money, the way people can defraud you, all the scams. I mean, there's so much stuff going on. And there is no world police, obviously. It all works at a different level. Can start in one country, an IP can take you to another country. It's IP I'm talking about, obviously, your internet connection. I'd start in financial crime because I find it fascinating, and then work your way into what you think you would like to do eventually, because behind financial crime, you can stay in financial crime, you can go into risk, you can go into compliance, you can go into different areas. And I know a lot of companies always want to have people who can analyze. It's an analytical job. So you can use a bit of AI to help you, but ultimately, when you're looking at undertaking an investigation, it's really fascinating from that perspective.
And then I was going to say, sort of tying into that, if you're a graduate seeing so many jobs getting automated away, and also UBS taking away the stipend at the end of the day, so you don't even get a meal for working late, which is outrageous. Where would you say, do you think compliance is like a growth area that's here to stay?
If we go back to the AI question, AI is only as good as two things at the moment, except for Claude, perhaps. But it's only as good as the data that you have, and it's only as good as the prompt you give it, right? So in the compliance world, the regulators want human beings. They don't want a computer to take over and make the decisions. They want that to be a support mechanism for you to be able to make faster decisions, but they don't want it to be the final and ultimate decision maker. And if it is the ultimate decision maker, they want to know about how you came about building the models that you built. and who has access to it, and who can change them, and who can alter them. I mean, there's a lot of layers of protection in the compliance world when it comes to physical human beings. I think for as long as regulators exist, my job is still safe. Let me just put it that way. And as regulators are still quite old school, some of them, as I said, are innovative. Some of them are so behind the curve. They really do want substance. They want human beings. They want people to make those ultimate decisions and be able to have that conversation with them as to how did they come about making that decision ultimately.
To round it all off, as someone that's done Sydney, Paris, London, many different companies, Stockholm, any advice to the younger generation on sort of moving around, seeing the world and balancing a career?
Oh my goodness. I think it's the most important thing in life is to move around the world, see different things. We live in Europe, which we're very fortunate to. This is probably one of the best continents in the world, I would say. The fascinating thing about Europe is, from a regulatory perspective, is that each country interprets European law the way it wants to. So actually, it's not homogenous at all, which makes it even more fascinating when we get back to that human side. Do we need humans, and will AI take over our jobs? I've worked with multiple European regulators. They've all got a very different way of looking at things. Germany is much tougher on the onboarding KYC side than UK is, than France is. It's all very different. So from that perspective, and also if you look culturally, people have varying different ways of looking at risk. Germans do not like to take any risk when it comes to finances. So from a sort of more traditional point of view and technology advancement, Germany, I would say, is not that advanced. So there's still a long way to go. I would travel. Then you go to LATAM. I went to Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay for one of my jobs. And that is a whole different culture in itself. And then America, we're talking about being...
freedom.
Yeah, well, they like to think that they're not regulated, but they're super regulated because every single state is like Europe. It's regulated. Yeah, you've got state regulation and federal. And so therefore, you are pretty much up against every single state when it comes to financial services. Any state can come after you. So it's even more risky than Europe, in a sense. At least Europe is trying to work towards a common goal. US, I would say, slightly different. And we haven't spoken about crypto, so let's not go there.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time. We won't open a crypto box this week because we'll be here for hours.
Exactly.
But thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Again, thanks for having me.
Are you going to make me say like and subscribe?
It's going to make you say it, man.
Ken, you can do it this week.
Thanks everyone for listening. When you get a chance or while you're watching, like and subscribe and keep an eye out for the next episode. Thank you.